The following is a lecture given by Hridayananda Das Goswami at Loyola University on October 20th, 1988 in New Orleans, Louisiana.
We are going to explain a few introductory points about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Do you have a Bhagavad Gita here? Anyway, what we are doing has been done for a very long time. It's not a new thing. For many, many thousands of years. And it's somewhat new in America, but from the perspective of the history of religions and culture and so on, it's a very common thing. Sometimes something's one place and then goes somewhere else. So now this has come to America, but what we're doing has been done for a very long time. So what are we doing? We are engaged in a process, the goal of which is to develop love of God. According to the Vedic literature, which we follow, originally written in Sanskrit, love of God is our original consciousness, the state of pure consciousness. And any other state of consciousness is more or less a corruption of that original consciousness. Just like when we speak of water, water exists in a pure state, and when water is corrupted or polluted, it manifests different characteristics. But the original state of water is pure, clean, transparent, and so on. In the same way, all of us have an original pure consciousness, and that consciousness is love of God. So in different ways, our consciousness becomes polluted. And when that happens, although all of us are eternal, although all of us are ultimately spiritual, we come to this material world. We become manifest here. We accept a material body. So this present condition that we're in which we are consciousness, we are life, we are souls, but somehow we're covered by different types of material bodies, which are temporary, not permanent. These are temporary bodies. This present condition is artificial, and the purpose of human life is to eliminate the cause of this condition. If we eliminate the cause, we eliminate the effect. So the cause of our being in this world and being subject to birth and death is the fact that our consciousness is polluted or contaminated by different types of exploitative desire to exploit the material world. So when we become free, purified of this desire, then we can return to our normal state, which is spiritual. So Father Coleman mentioned that we might speak on the difference between materialism and spiritualism. So briefly I would say that if someone takes matter to be the highest reality, then he's a materialist. And if someone understands that beyond matter there's a superior energy or a superior nature, then the person becomes a spiritualist. Krishna explains this point. When we say Krishna, we mean God. It's a very old word for God. And if we have some chalk here, maybe I'll explain a little about the word Krishna. These dots are, this is a international system for writing Sanskrit language. Anyway, this is pronounced Krish. This dot just means it's pronounced like SH. It will be pronounced more or less like this. So this by itself is a verbal root in Sanskrit which means to attract. To attract. And so the word Krishna means the all-attractive. In this world, the more beauty we have, the more strength or money or fame or intelligence, the more attractive we become to other people. So it said that God is that person who possesses infinite beauty, infinite strength and wealth, intelligence and so on. Therefore he's all attractive. And that which is attractive also gives us pleasure. If we see something very beautiful, or if we associate with a very important person, we feel a certain pleasure. So because God is the most attractive, He also gives the highest pleasure. This is a name for God. The word God, in Sanskrit, a very common word even today in India, which I'll also explain, is this word. Bhagavan, which you may have heard sometimes misapplied in different modern contexts, but originally what this word means, Bhaga. This word Bhaga means different types of opulences, as we've discussed, such as beauty, fame, intelligence, strength, wealth, renunciation, different attractive qualities that a person can have in this world. And this word Van is just a Sanskrit suffix meaning one who has. So one who possesses all these opulences, all these attractive features is called Bhagavan. And because God possesses all these things, therefore He's also called Krishna, or the all-attractive. And then another word for God is Rama, which you may have heard. The root, Ram, R-A-M, by itself means to enjoy. And also it can mean to give pleasure. So the word Rama also means the source of all pleasure. And one last word that I'll explain, Hare, from the Hare Krishna mantra, is a particular form of a word which means the internal potency of the Lord. The idea is as follows. God has different energies, but they're principally stated to be matter and spirit. So at the present time, we are conditioned by the material energy. For example, if you were born with a male body, you feel certain desires, you have a certain psychology. And similarly, the female body has different desires, different feelings. Or if you're born in a particular ethnic setting, if you're born in a particular country, a particular culture, if you have a particular age, there's a certain psychology of young people, of old people, of babies, and so on. So in so many different ways, by the body we've acquired and by the environment that we're functioning in, we're conditioned. We're conditioned. For example, before puberty, we didn't have this whole issue of sex desire. At least it wasn't very prominent. Sex is not a very prominent thing, generally, before physical maturity. And then after physical maturity, a whole new set of conditions come in. So in so many ways we are conditioned. We're impelled to act. We're forced to act, even sometimes against our desire. For example, someone may be addicted to cigarettes and may come to the rational conclusion that it's really not in my self-interest to kill myself by smoking. The invasion is continuing. We haven't got a voting majority yet, but we're So, someone, on the one hand, our intelligence may tell us something, and on the other hand, we may not be able to carry out the decision of our intelligence. We may lack the willpower. As the Christians say, the spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. So this is a common dichotomy. Another thing I'd like to illustrate or write on the board, in a very brief nutshell, the Vedic psychology, which I think in many ways is more comprehensive and more clear than the Western version. We can begin simply by talking about matter, which is basically what we perceive in the material world. And then according to the Gita, above matter, there are the senses, which perceive matter. And then above the senses is the mind. The mind is not, as in some Western philosophy, just an all-inclusive term, which means everything related to consciousness. The mind, according to the Vedic scheme is a specific function. It's that part of us which accepts things and rejects them. The idea that I like this, I don't like this, I want, I don't want, I feel good, I don't feel good, I'm happy, I'm depressed. So what's happening is the senses are interacting with matter, and the mind is sort of in the middle of all that. You see something with your eyes, and the mind feels that I like that vision, or I like that sight, or I don't like it, I like that sound, I don't like that sound. So the mind is coordinating and selecting different sense experiences, rejecting others. So that's the function of the mind. Then above this, I'm not able to reach the highest level, but anyway, planning here. Intelligence in the Vedic scheme is simply the rational faculty. It's the rational faculty by which we analyze things, we understand through logic, through reason, and so on and so forth. And then above intelligence is what is called the false ego. The false ego in this scheme means ultimately how we see ourselves, what we consider ourselves to be. Generally, what's happening is that the senses are perceiving matter. The mind is reacting to those perceptions in a positive or negative sense. And because the senses become attached to material things, for example, let's say a boy sees an attractive girl. So that so-called attractive girl ultimately is just a particular configuration of material elements. You can study it in physics or chemistry or biology or physiology. It's just a particular material phenomenon. Similarly, the girl sees a boy, that's just another material configuration. There is a life inside. There is a soul inside of all that. The body itself is nothing more than a machine, which is being driven by the life force. So when the senses see that particular machine or attractive object, the mind becomes very attracted, and the senses become very attached. Then the intelligence comes into play and tries to figure out how to get that object. How can I possess that object that I'm attracted to? And the false ego in this case is the many times unspoken or unarticulated conviction that I am this body. In other words, underlying this whole process is a conviction that I am the body. I am an American. I am Chinese, or I am Latino, or I am Russian, or I am black or white. I am a girl. I am a boy. I'm young. I'm old. This conviction, which more or less underlies the whole materialistic worldview, is called false ego. Because in fact, the real person is none of these things. The real person is, the Sanskrit word is Atma. There are many words. Atma means the soul, or you could call it the self. Another word is Brahma, which means the spirit. But the idea is that our real self, what we are, who we are, is none of these categories. We are the witness within the body, the witness and the observer. But because we falsely accept the body to be the self, we get dragged into the drama of material life. Shakespeare said the world's a stage. We get dragged into this whole thing, and we spend our whole life more or less fighting for things that we like and trying to avoid things that we don't like. We divide ourselves up according to bodies. These are the Americans, these are the British, these are the Russians, these are the blacks, these are the whites, these are the yellows, or whatever. And or these are Democrats, these are Republicans. In so many ways we divide ourselves up into different groups and different camps, and all this social interaction, often violent, is going on. But in fact, we're not any of these things. All of these designations that we accept are ultimately false. We are, all of us, simply the pure self who is experiencing all of this. So, materialism means that someone is has not been able to progress beyond this simple mistake. person is accepting this body as a self and ignoring the real identity. It's very difficult to understand how this body could be the self. Simple reason that we've had so many bodies, even in this lifetime. We had our baby's body, so where is that body now? We had a child's body, we had adolescent body, now we've got a student body or a professor body or whatever. So we assume all these bodies, but they're not all the same body. The little baby body was this big, so where is that now? It's not here anymore. And yet, the whole coherence of human civilization is based on the continuity of our personal identity. We are, in one sense, the same person, obviously. It's not that if I go away, I come back years later, my family says, oh, we don't know you. They know me. I'm the same person. So there is a person who is experiencing all these different bodies, and that person is a soul. So in materialism, the person just ignores all this. Sometimes they give very silly arguments like consciousness is just a byproduct of the brain. This is a silly argument because the proof which is given is that by manipulating the brain in different ways, we manipulate the manifestation of consciousness. But by such an argument, you could also very easily prove that light bulbs create electricity. But does anyone here think that light bulbs create electricity? Electricity is a byproduct of light bulbs. Actually, the light bulb conducts electricity. And the whole electrical apparatus, it conducts electricity and manifests it. So, in the same way, the body is actually conducting consciousness. The body is conducting consciousness, and therefore when the body becomes modified or injured or whatever, consciousness also becomes changed because it's being conducted by the body. But when one becomes fully self-realized or fully what we say Krishna conscious, aware of God, aware of the soul, then the consciousness is no longer dependent upon the body. In our original state, consciousness is not dependent on the body. So, I've explained some things about the soul, about God. As far as the purpose of creation, I'll just touch on that. The idea is that somehow or other, by our free will, we've developed a desire to enjoy without God, or to exploit this material world in different ways. So according to our desire, we accept material bodies, and basically that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to enjoy this world according to our different desires. But our real position is not simply to exploit or manipulate this world. Our real position is to serve. We are actually meant to render loving service. And in any case, we have to serve. We serve our country. All the statues you see around the cities are people that are supposed to have given good service to the city or the country or whatever. So actually, we are meant to serve. And ultimately, our service is meant for God because we are part of God. Just like the finger is part of the body. So the finger always is supposed to serve the body. If you think about it, all day your finger is supposed to do something for the body. So the same way, we're supposed to be engaged in God's service because we're part of it. So when we somehow don't like that, we don't want to serve God, then we come to this material world. So this world exists so to give us an arena, an area in which we can try to become the enjoyers of matter. But since that's ultimately not possible for various reasons, first of all, matter is ultimately not that enjoyable. It's just matter. No matter how you squeeze it or twist it or shape it or what color it is, it's just matter. It's just a bunch of molecules and atoms, and ultimately it's not that enjoyable, at least not enough to satisfy the soul. And also the whole attitude of trying to enjoy matter is illicit, because it doesn't belong to us. We don't take the time to even ask, well, who does this planet belong to? Does it belong to someone? That's not on the agenda. That question is not on the agenda. So a person who takes something first and asks later to whom it belongs is more or less called a thief in ordinary language. Thief means at first I take something and later I'll worry about who it belongs to, whom it belongs to. So, in the same way, this whole massive attempt, planetary endeavor to exploit the world, industrialization, now post-industrial, whatever it is going on now. This whole enterprise is basically illicit, basically thievery, because we're not taking the time to ask, does this planet belong to anyone? Before we cut all the forests down, do they belong to anyone? Do the rivers belong to anyone? So because the whole modern attempt to enjoy the planet is basically thievery, naturally there's a reaction. Everything's sort of backfiring. It's sort of going the wrong way. We've created a situation in which the planet itself is threatened by all of our pollution. And so many, you all know these are all common knowledge. These things are all common knowledge nowadays. And the threat of Holocaust, all these things. So just as a thief is punished, so this modern civilization, which is basically illicit, is also being punished by the laws of nature. And if we keep pushing, the nature will push back also harder, and ultimately the whole thing will collapse. So before that happens, it behooves us to try seriously to understand what we are, what God is, what this world is, and live our lives accordingly and try and teach others. There's a great need nowadays in America and everywhere else to teach people about the real purpose of life. There's so much propaganda, false propaganda. There should be some true information also. So that's what we're trying to do. And we also invite all of you, to the best of your ability, to try to dedicate your life to teaching others before everything collapses. Then it'll be a big mess. And in any case, we'll go on, but it'd be a lot easier if we could adjust ourselves before everything collapses. So perhaps I'll stop at this point. We have plenty of time for questions. Any questions or any points you may want to discuss? Yes.
Did you react to the Buddhist notion of no self in terms of the Vedic notion of self?
Mm-hmm.
About mine?
The material self is false. In that sense, we would agree with the Buddhists. The material self is false. But I don't know if you know Dr. Upadhyaya in Hawaii. Anyway, we were sort of friends. So he was telling me he delivered a paper in India a year or two ago on Buddhism, in which he's making the point very strongly that Buddha himself was accepted as an incarnation of God in India, did not directly deny any possible self, but rather just denied the material self. Anyway, he developed this theme in his paper. So there are two kinds of statements in the scriptures. One kind of statement denies material self, and the other type of statement affirms what is true. So to say that nothing is true, I think is not really satisfactory. To say that nothing is true because it's very difficult to understand what that means, that nothing is true. But rather the material self is false. For example, if someone thinks, I am an American, I am a Russian, I am Chinese, I am whatever, that's actually an illusion. But it doesn't mean that I am an illusion. For example, if someone's example is given of something, if someone's walking in the forest and sees a rope and thinks it's a snake, becomes frightened. So that's an illusion. Thinking the rope is a snake is illusion. But the rope actually exists, and the snake also exists somewhere else. There are real snakes, and there is a real rope. But taking the rope to be a snake is an illusion. So in the same way, we take the body to be the self. So thinking I am this body, I'm white, I'm black, I'm American, I'm Chinese, that's illusion. But I exist, the body exists, and I also exist. But myself as the body doesn't exist. So we would put it that way.
I think Bruce would put it in terms of the whole notion of self as a social construct.
self as a...
As a social construct.
It is, again, the false self. But rejecting the false self as a social construct, for example, someone's brought up in a particular ethnic or racial or political community, they may think that other people in other communities are actually my enemies, or I have nothing to do with them. There's no way in which we're actually one. And so in that way, socially or whatever, we develop a false concept. Ultimately, all of us are a spirit. All of us are the same type of thing. So, but rejecting the false self doesn't mean that there's not a real self.
Would that be a point of difference though between Vedic and, say, Theravada Buddhist doctrine?
Yes.
I think they push that pretty hard. Any type of self, any notion of self.
Yeah, that in Sanskrit that's called Shunyavad, or voidist philosophy, saying that ultimately the truth is nothingness or whatever. But as I mentioned, Buddha himself is predicted in the Vedic literature as an incarnation of God. The idea is that, stated in the Bhagavatam, that when people became very materialistic about 2,500 years ago and were in India and were exploiting Vedic sacrifices, which sometimes involved thousands and thousands of years ago, there were yogis and Brahmins that had the power to sacrifice an old animal and actually bring it to life with a new body, that according to the scriptures. So in this age, it's also said the Brahmins, because this age is very fallen, no longer have the power to do that. But what happened is there was widespread animal slaughter in the name of sacrifice, but actually just because, I guess, the ancient Indian version of the golden arches. So, just like, for example, in the Old Testament, there's stories about animal sacrifice in which it's a very serious affair offering to God. But now, for example, there's a huge meat industry, and they have kosher meat. So the idea is it's become a rubber stamp, just a ritual, just to stamp it and get it out to the market. So, in the same way in India, this widespread animal slaughter had arisen. Therefore, Buddha came and he denied the authority of the Vedic sacrifices. Although he himself was an incarnation, he denied the authority of Vedic sacrifices and preached nonviolence, ahimsa, and was very successful. Some history books record that some, I think, Chinese monks who had been converted to Buddhism and visited India soon after his departure from this world, they recorded in their notebooks that the meat eating had practically stopped in India, especially among the educated classes, it practically stopped. So there's a famous Sanskrit work called Gita Govinda by Jayadev, in which he, very famous in India, in which he praises 10 principal incarnations of Vishnu, Krishna, and he includes Buddha in his list. And he says in his song that Nindasi jaggavidhera haha sudhi jatam sadaya hridaya darshita pasukhatam keshava jita buddha sarira jaya jagadisha hare. He says, my Lord, you incarnated as Buddha. The prayer, my Lord, you incarnated as Buddha, and you denied the Vedic sacrifices. Nindasi jaggavidhera. You denied the Vedic sacrifices out of your great compassion for the animals that were being slaughtered. So, also the Bhagavatam predicts the appearance of Buddha. Buddha nam nangjana sutta kikateshu bhavishati. That Buddha will come. It explains what place he will come, and his family and so on. So, the mission is Buddha's mission is understood in that way in India. Of course, Buddha originally came to India, and later, when the appearance of Shankar, who preached very strongly his own philosophy, Buddhism, lost its popularity in India. It was finished in India to a large extent, and then it carried on farther east, farther eastern countries. So yes, to deny that there is any self is, I think, not very practical. We can deny the false self, but we should not deny the real self. So that, as you mentioned, that is a point of view. Yes.
Take for instance, like if I'm Catholic right now, and I decided that I wanted to become a Christian, how would you guys do this? How do you become a Christian?
Well, first of all, even if someone is a Catholic or a Christian or a Jew or Muslim, whatever, even if someone doesn't change their religion, he can take advantage of this process. So as far as what you would do, well, chant Hare Krishna. These are names of God. Another very important thing is that we should not eat any food which is not offered to God. That's a great impediment for spiritual advancement. Food, of course, the Christians say grace. And in the Vedic culture, there's a formal process for offering the food to God. And also, according to our principles, one should not eat meat, fish, or eggs. Meat, fish, and eggs, according to Vedic principles, are not meant for human consumption. Our food, of course, the Christians say grace. And in the Vedic culture, there's a formal process for offering the food to God. And also, according to our principles, one should not eat meat, fish, or eggs. Meat, fish, and eggs, according to Vedic principles, are not meant for human consumption, according to God's will. We have 4, what you might call moral principles. We don't eat meat, fish, or eggs, no gambling, no illicit sex, which is pretty much in the Catholic sense of not for procreation within marriage, and no intoxication, not even coffee, tea, or cigarettes. So, actually it's interesting in this connection that the so-called sexual revolution in America, then everywhere around the world, actually did away with natural sex. It did away with natural sex. Although it claimed it justified itself by saying it was natural. Because when you have sex, the natural result is procreation. And when there's procreation, there's birth. And also, from the psychological viewpoint, for a child, it's very natural to have a stable home with a mother and father that don't get divorced and don't separate, and so on. There are many psychological problems. In other words, it's unnatural. Separation of the family. So actually, as in the Catholic principles, having sex in marriage for the purpose of procreation is actually natural sex. So we follow, so these 4 principles are very important. Without following these 4 principles, it's very difficult to make tangible progress. Nowadays, there's many so-called theologies explaining why we can't really give up materialism and how we can be saved even without giving up all of our bad habits. But actually, these theologies are not very genuine. The point is that if one has a bona fide process, if one takes it very seriously, it is possible gradually to give up these bad habits. And if one can follow these 4 principles, then spiritual progress is not difficult. It's not difficult. Christ spoke about, I think he mentioned something about not looking with lust. Do you know that statement? What is that statement?
One looking with lust another person, he commits sins in the heart.
Is that correct? So, imagine, what Christ said is of course true. It's a completely valid principle. And yet just driving here from not very far away, over by that Colonel Beauregard, what's that park, City Park? We had to pass innumerable attempts to incite lust in the heart. To sell all kinds of different products. So I was thinking how silly this is, a society which becomes so crass and so devoid of real culture, that although in any serious tradition, either Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or any what to speak of those, just any civilized tradition, it's understood that lust and promiscuity is a great impediment to higher consciousness. And yet the whole environment is saturated with very crass attempts to provoke lust in us, even if we are not lusty, to make us lusty, so that lust can be channeled into the purchase of some trivial or even deadly product. So this kind of society doesn't have a long future, frankly speaking. There's no real basis for it. So we should try to help the situation. But even if one is a Catholic or whatever one is, they can be helped in their own principles by these processes. This philosophy, this chanting is very powerful. It's a very powerful aid to any serious attempt at spirituality. Yeah.
If you accept the existence of a non-physical self, would you say that you still have individuality and independence of Atma outside of the physical existence?
Oh, yeah.
And after this temporary condition of life is over, do you still have independence of soul?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's an important point. There's a common misconception propagated, unfortunately, by the people from the East themselves, who don't really know their own literature, that after liberation, the soul merges into something. In fact, you can read this in many textbooks. The soul merges into some type of impersonal existence. But that's not actually, it's not the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, which is the most important text from India. Certainly not the philosophy even of the Upanishads. I'll just give one example. There's innumerable examples, but I'll just give one very briefly of how that is not actually the philosophy of the Vedic literature. This is just a simple phrase which is part of a longer verse. Nityo Nityanam. The word Nitya in Sanskrit means eternal. And Nityanam, if any of you know classical languages, is just the plural genitive case, which means of the eternals. So what this verse states, well, I won't write the whole thing out, but Nityo Nityanam, that God is the supreme eternal among all the eternals. So the fact that there's a plurality of eternal beings means, of course, that after liberation, after we transcend this temporary existence, we still remain individual. And that's the whole spirit of bhakti or devotion that, as we were just discussing in relation to Buddhist philosophy, that the problem is not the self or the individuality. The problem is the contaminated self, or the false self of thinking, I am the body, or I am the master of this world. But if someone thinks, I am a servant of God, that self is real. That's a pure self. So that continues. That's eternal. Krishna also says that. In the Bhagavad Gita, he says that, he said, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. They were on a battlefield. He said, nor in the future. Actually, he literally what he said is that, and in the future, it is not that all of us will not exist. In other words, all of us shall exist in the future. He uses the word sarve vayam. All of us will exist forever. So, that's the idea. It's just the false self that has to be transcended, not the real self.
Doesn't this desire to reincarnate or to exist further kind of inhibit the whole thrust of what you're talking about? In a sense, there seems to be a tradition in a certain strain of Vedic literature which says, I ask nothing of this or of any other life.
Yeah, that's a fact. If, therefore, the desire for salvation, mukti kama, the desire for salvation, is also not considered to be the stage of perfection. Although the Vedic literature is very practical the Vedic literature deals with you whatever stage you're at, and then gradually tries to bring you to higher and higher stages. So, for example, if someone, let's say, is a gross materialist who's addicted to all types of pleasures, rather than just rebuke that person or try to convince that person to act like a self-realized soul, there are different sacrifices and rituals and processes by which that person can satisfy their desires, but at the same time gradually learn some discipline, austerity, and begin to come to a higher consciousness. So similarly, if one desires salvation, there are statements in the scriptures also which say the obvious, that if you want real freedom or salvation, you have to become enlightened. You can't get it materially. But ultimately, even that desire for salvation, yes, is a material desire. But it's not that all desire is bad. We have that phobia. We think that all desire is bad, or that all ego is bad. But just as there's pure ego, there's also pure desire. The desire to serve God without any expectation or desire for reward is a pure desire. That is the pure desire of the soul. And we cannot be desireless, because desire is a sign of life and consciousness. So the devotee, there are many prayers. There are many prayers in the devotional literature in which the devotees are praying for service, praying to serve God. That desire is not considered to be material. It's considered to be a spiritual desire. Whereas the desire to save one's own neck, even spiritually, is as you correctly put it, does inhibit the full manifestation of the self. So therefore there's a very nice verse in Bengali, which, I'll write that out. It's very nice Bengali poetry, beautiful example of Bengali poetry. See, made it under the wire there. This bhukti means ordinary material gratification. Eat, drink, and be merry. Or to have a beautiful wife, children, big house, all that. That's called bhukti. And then mukti, of course, means salvation. Mukti or moksha, salvation, liberation, the material condition. And siddhi, this word siddhi means mystic powers you develop in yoga. In other words, to get supernatural or mystic powers by which you do all kinds of very amazing things through yoga and meditation, all that. That's called siddhi. So the verse says that, and the word kami, kama means desire in Sanskrit. Kami means one who desires. So the verse says, one who desires bhukti, mukti, or siddhi, sakali, all these people are ashanta, not peaceful, not actually realized. And then then the next line says, that Krishna Bhakta, one who's fully devoted to God, Nishkam, has no selfish desire. I mean, his only desire is to serve God. Ataiva, therefore Shanta. Therefore he's actually peaceful. Or he's actually realized. So even the desire to get rid of the self, which is interesting how a non-self could desire to get rid of itself, or there's nothing there anyway. There's a lot of logical problems. But anyway, if we desire to get rid of the self or to merge into something, that's also a type of mukti kam, the desire for liberation. So this is a statement that bhukti, mukti, siddhi, kami, sakali, ashanta, all these people who desire mystic powers, sense gratification, and salvation, they're ashanta, not yet settled in their real identity. But the one who's fully devoted to God with no self, just simply desires to serve God. There are many prayers like that. Like Lord Chaitanya prayed that life after life, let me be your pure servant. In other words, even if I'm not liberated, as you may have suspected, in the Bhagavad Gita philosophy there is reincarnation, because the soul is eternal. The soul is eternal. You have many lives in the past, you have many lives, hopefully you won't have many lives in the future. We're supposed to be liberated. But, so there are many prayers where the devotees pray that even if I have to come into this world life after life, simply let me be your servant. In fact, there's one very nice song by a great Bengali saint, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He wrote many beautiful songs. He has one song where he says, talking about Brahma. Brahma is the creator of the universe. He's not God. He's a servant of God, but very big-time servant. So Bhaktivinoda sings that, he said, I would rather be born as a worm in the house of your devotee more than before I would accept birth as Brahma, but without devotion for you. Better to be born as a worm, but at least in a house where I can hear someone glorifying you. So the idea is that there are many songs like that where the devotee says, I don't care about salvation, I'll come back to this world and suffer as long as I can just have some service. But that is the spirit of it.
Like Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Just returning to what you were saying about taking people where they are in stages and
Yes.
and so forth. Seems to me another perspective on that is that insight into the nature of reality can be achieved instantaneously, and that the desire to go through process actually can inhibit that insight, because you're always trying to arrive at a point which never comes until you achieve the insight, until you achieve the breakthrough.
Yeah, there's also statements like that. We agree that if someone is willing to accept, then he should be given immediately the highest truth. It's not, in other words, there's no attempt to just avoid giving the truth just for the sake of hierarchy. If someone, and there's also, there's many statements to that effect also, for example, that even materially the lowest person, even the so-called outcast, can immediately become a Brahmin if he simply chants God's name. There are some very beautiful statements like that. There's one statement by a great lady named Devahuti, who appeared many, many eons ago, I guess, and she, the Lord took birth as her son. Just like in the Christian tradition, there's Mary, who gave birth to the Son of God. So the Lord took birth as her son, and she spoke a very beautiful verse in which she says that Ahovata sapachoto guriyan jajivagre vartate namatubhyam. She said that even the untouchable, so it said even so-called outcast, the lowest person, becomes immediately a holy person if they just chant God's name seriously. So there is that spirit, that anyone who will surrender to God, no matter what his external position, immediately becomes the best person. But for the people that won't do that, then there's a gradual process. So they're not completely abandoned. But certainly the first choice would be for everyone just to surrender to God.
I don't know if I can ask this right, but what is the way you dress and the way your hair is cut? What does that symbolize?
It's our uniform.
It's just for the, I don't know.
Yeah, these things, I think outward dress and marking the body in different ways is significant, at least in our present condition of life. Because sometimes in our society, dress is used to demarcate in an arrogant way. One group being better than another group or whatever. That there's also a tendency in modern society to reject that in everyone. Doesn't matter how you dress. But ultimately, dress can also be very useful. For example, I saw a billboard for the Marines when I was coming here. What does it say? Join America's defensive line. I don't know if you've seen that billboard. So it's a fact that someone who's trying to get into that military consciousness, you're supposed to really dress a certain way. Football players dress a certain way. Firemen, policemen, doctors also dress a certain way. Even professors dress a certain way. So different types of dress do tend to at least be conducive to a particular consciousness. So we are trying to perform a particular service in society, a service of teaching, trying to give spiritual knowledge. And this dress, I was just thinking about this the other day, that this particular dress, these robes which are associated with monastic life or religious life, actually are nice. I mean, it does help to create a nice consciousness. Yeah, they have words in India. The robe, the bottom half is called a dhoti, they call it in India. There are different words. This kind of shirt is called a kurta. Yes.
Do y'all have like jobs, or is y'all everyday life like devoted totally to this, or I mean, what is y'all's normal everyday life? What do y'all do?
Those of us who are not married, if someone's not married, then they take a vow of celibacy. So those who are not married, they just preach and do their work and live within that religious setting.
Y'all aren't allowed to go out.
Oh, I came out to come here?
I know you're allowed to, but do y'all mostly stay in that city? Like,
We have very dynamic life. Just the other point that those who are married, they often work, maintain their families and children and so on. So a married person can work. As far as going out, you mean social life?
well, no, like how you said you came here and you saw these different things. It doesn't seem like that you were out a lot. It was like different. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like y'all live on, again, just like one place, and you don't really leave. You just kind of do what you do just around at that place.
Personally, I travel quite a bit, probably more than most people, many different continents. So some of us have a very demanding schedule. We travel a lot, go to all kinds of different places. And then some people stay more in the temple. It depends on their service.
Could you tell us a bit how you came to realize it yourself?
How I came to this movement? My background was not untypical. I was born in a very exotic place called the People's Republic of California. And then I went to an even more exotic place, which is called Berkeley, California. I went to school there, and I became dissatisfied, which was not very uncommon at that time, but I went to school during the most turbulent years there. And in a nutshell, I'd say that I could see that they were putting the cart before the horse, that without defining or convincing us of what the goal of life was, we were supposed to be motivated to achieve something. So it seemed like we were just supposed to get very fired up within an ocean of meaninglessness. And it didn't seem logical. So I thought, well, the first thing is, let's find out what the purpose of life is, and who we are, and what this is all about, what God is, and then we'll figure out, how to be enthusiastic and what we should do and all that. Plato also says this. Plato says it's meaningless to talk about what we should and should not do if we don't know who we are. So my concern became to find out, who am I? And I quickly found out that my illustrious professors at Berkeley didn't have the slightest idea. And they did have any ideas. Usually they were ideas which were not very attractive to me. They were very materialistic ideas. So in the course of, as the term goes, searching, in the course of all this serious searching, I became satisfied. I chose this process for two reasons. Number one, I felt the philosophy was most extensive, comprehensive. I found wisdom in many traditions, but I felt here was the most complete statement. And then the second reason was that I felt the process was most efficacious. It wasn't just a nice bit of wisdom, but there were people who were actually practicing it, following disciplined principles. And it seemed to me that without discipline, you can't really achieve anything in this world. So the basis of those two things, I took the plunge.
Where did you go when you first started working in California?
Yes. I stayed there for a while, then I got shipped out to Boston to work on our press. We had to help with editing. And then I came to New Orleans in 1971. No. I only stayed a few months. And I've been to many places. In 1972, I was given a special service of traveling and preaching. I spent a couple of years in America traveling around. Then I've done a lot of work in South America, all over South America for many years, and also Europe, India.
Are you considered like a priest?
Yeah, something like that.
I just wondered because I mean you spoke. I was just wondering if it was because you just volunteered to.
I did volunteer, but I happened to be visiting New Orleans area, so they invited me to come. Yeah.
Okay, on the self again. First, how exactly would the Atma, which is eternal, become trapped in a physical self? And secondly, what would the value be of whatever experience would be attained during physical existence, the temporary physical existence? What value is that to the soul?
As far as how the soul becomes trapped and what the value is of the experiences here. We have free will. That's a very important point. In fact, the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, ends with Krishna's statement to Arjuna, Yatechasi tata kuru, as you desire, so act accordingly. In other words, I've instructed, said I've given you all this information, now you do as you like. So the free will is very important. And we have the choice of materialism or spiritualism. In other words, we can either accept our real identity, which is that we're eternal servants of God, or we can pretend and even convince ourselves that we are actually the lords of this world. So the soul has that choice. He has that free will. He has to voluntarily love God. The only advantage is that the existence of an option means that our spiritual existence is voluntary and in that sense meaningful. Something that we choose freely. We're not simply enlightened robots. Otherwise, there is no real value in material existence. And in fact, we should become very convinced on that point, that there is no value in material life. And we have to become convinced of that in order to take seriously the spiritual life.
So there's no value in the soul until you've experienced the lesser state, the physical?
No, you can.
Restrictions?
It's not necessary to come to this material world. It's not that all souls come here. Somehow or other. In fact, it's said that in God's creation, all the material universes, because there are many universes in the Vedic cosmology, all these universes and all the innumerable, almost you might say innumerable living beings here, are only a fraction of God's creation. Just like the prison, there are fewer people in the prison than walking the streets. So we don't have to come here, but somehow or other we wanted to try our luck here. So we should understand that there is no value in this godless world. Of course, even in this material world, we can become godly. We can be enlightened even in this world. But material life doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go anyone in this world, even someone in this world, like Christ, for example. Christ should be considered a liberated soul even while he was in this world. So that's also, there are many examples in India also. Even though one is apparently in the material world, even though one apparently has a material body, one can be a liberated soul. For example, let's say a lawyer or government official goes into the prison to talk to some prisoner. So some other prisoner who's not very intelligent may think, hey, look, the government official's in prison too. He got locked up too, like us. That's not the fact. He's not locked up. He just went there to do some work. Isn't it? Even though a government official, a lawyer, goes into the prison, even though they lock the door behind him, he's not a prisoner. He's just doing his business, his work. So in the same way, if someone like Christ comes to this world, even though he may appear to have a material body, he's not one of the conditioned souls. He's not one of the prisoners of this world. He's just doing his work. Plato talks about this also, about going back to the cave. That after someone has come out of the cave and seen the light, to help the others, he may go back to the cave. So it's a simple point. But we are actually conditioned by this world. But we can also be liberated. But as you were saying, as I was saying, we do have to become completely convinced that there is no value or real happiness in material life. We have to become very convinced of it.
The way you're speaking about Christ is actually, no offense, a Christian heresy called Docetism. There is an attempt today to kind of reintegrate the work of Christ in the Incarnation in a much more positive, less dualistic light. That is to say, in John's Gospel, God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son. So the Christian tradition, at least today as it's being reappropriated, is to emphasize more the value of this world and this life. And that there's a radical continuity between the world and what is to come. And that Christ comes in the Christian sense not just to work, but to show people how to live and how to enter into the present world. And
Yes.
His healings and so forth are all.
Yes. Yeah, the idea is that matter comes from spirit. For matter, we say better say it, matter is subordinate to spirit. Although in our conditioned or diseased state, the spirit becomes subordinate to matter. But God is spirit. God is certainly the boss. And also, as Plato talks about in the Republic, in a just man, the spirit is, the pure intelligence is above the man to the body. Whereas in a person who's not well adjusted is the opposite. So, God's plan for this world is very nice. If we cooperate with Him, then there won't be material problems either. For example, there's a statement in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that Sahajaga Prajasrishtva Purovacha Prajapati. Since the beginning of creation, men were created with the process of sacrifice to God.